Okay, Chair, I'm on YouTube. You can start one if you like.
Okay, thank you very much. It's Thursday the 24th of September. It's now 3:30. I'd like to welcome everyone to this virtual meeting of the Corporate Affairs and Audit Committee. Can I remind all participants that normal rules of procedure apply? For example, comments and questions need to be directed through the chair. As you ask a question, can you also state your name for those that are viewing it on YouTube? As we're meeting virtually, proceedings may take slightly longer, so your patience is appreciated. As per our virtual meeting procedures, if questions have been received prior to the meeting, I'll call on the relevant member at the appropriate time to raise that question. Please be as specific as possible about the issue on which you are speaking to. And whilst members of the public can view this meeting via YouTube Live, they will not be able to actively participate or comment on proceedings. As this meeting is being live streamed, can I remind all participants that their conduct should reflect this? Thank you. Okay, I'll move on to agenda item 1. Apologies for absence. Do we have any?
Yes, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Rooney.
Okay, thank you for that, Susan. Do we have any declarations of interest? Okay, I'll take the silence as a no. I'll move on to the minutes from the meeting of the 30th of July. Does anybody have any comments or amendments?
Yes, Chair, just a minor one from ourselves. Page 5, the going concern post balance sheet, the valuation direct out property, the last sentence talks about, sorry, I've lost it, where's it gone? The impact of uncertainty of the audit opinion of uncertainty. I think that's probably just on, because it makes it sound like our opinion is going to be uncertain. Really minor point, but just to clarify.
Okay, does anybody else have any comments or amendments?
Just, Chair, I think it doesn't mention about the accounts being qualified. I may be wrong because I've just quickly looked through the minutes. As anyone can see if they are there or not.
Yeah, I didn't note it when I read through them. Does anybody have any objections to those amendments? Are they agreed? Silence is gold, and this is good today. Okay, I'll move on to the next agenda item. And for this, I will hand over to Veritao. It's the annual counter fraud review. You may need to unmute yourself, Jonathan.
Still muted?
You're on now.
Apologies. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Dodsworth, and I manage the counter fraud team at Veritao. The team and I are fairly new to Middlesbrough, and our work has just begun. But a review of the counter fraud framework seemed like a good place to start. Our report starts at page 9 of your packs. And I won't go into too much detail, but I'll try and pick out the key sections and answer any questions that you have. I think it's worth starting by saying that fraud is an issue for councils across the UK. The most recent estimate is that it costs up to £7.4 billion every year. And when fraud occurs at local authorities, it effectively means that public money that we all pay into the public purse is being stolen by criminals and used by criminals. The report details what's going on in terms of fraud against local authorities nationally. One of the big areas currently are the efforts to stop people from inappropriately accessing COVID-19 grants that were made available by government and administered by local authorities. The grants have been targeted by organized criminals, and that's nationally and internationally. The report also looks at SIPFA's Fraud and Corruption Tracker. This is an annual report that we review every year, and the report points to adult social care fraud, procurement fraud, and council tax related discounts as being areas of high risk to local authorities. We reviewed the policy framework at the council and found that the council's counter-fraud strategy, anti-fraud strategy, and fraud risk assessment were all due to be updated this year. So I'll briefly talk you through those items. Appendix number 1 of your packs is a national counter-fraud strategy called Fighting Fraud and Corruption Locally. And we've used this as a reference point for the new strategy for Middlesbrough. And that strategy is contained in Appendix 2, which is on page 45 of your packs. The strategy measures the council against the national strategy, and there are 4 key themes: govern, acknowledge, prevent, and pursue. And the council meets many of these guidelines, but there's still work to be done. Contained in the strategy is an action plan, which we intend to refresh every year and add new tasks as some become completed. So some of the actions are just to report to the committee regularly, undertake fraud awareness training with members of staff, and publicize new channels for the public and employees to report their concerns of fraud. Appendix 3 is a revised anti-fraud policy, and it creates a framework to investigate fraud, to take action against those who commit fraud against the council, and to recover any of the losses. All of those are, key objectives. And finally, on Appendix 4, on page 71, there's an updated fraud risk assessment and for Middlesbrough, and the risk assessment supports some of the key fraud risks highlighted nationally, like adult social care, council tax, but it also covers areas like cybercrime, theft of goods from the council, recruitment fraud, and blue badge fraud. So that runs through my report, and thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, do any members have any questions? I'm not seeing any indication from anybody. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. Sorry, Councillor Marston's just raised his hand.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Jonathan, you said our fraud policy is going to be updated this year. Has it started, or will it be finished before the end of the year?
The fraud strategy or the fraud policy?
Yes.
Yeah, the fraud strategy will start from now, and it will be reviewed every year moving forward. The policy will come into effect when it's been approved by the executive, I believe.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for that. I'll move on to the next agenda item, and that is the internal audit progress report. So I'll hand over again to Veritao on this one.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This is our second internal audit progress report of the year. The covering report, starting at page 81, summarises the work we've done since the report to the committee in July. Paragraph 6 to 9 are the detail there, and that just gives you a bit of detail about the way we're currently operating. We're carrying out all of our audits remotely, holding virtual meetings. We've also started to use some auditors from the wider Veritao group on some of the audits here, so that just allows us to tap into some different experience and give a fresh perspective in some cases. There's 2 appendices to the report. Appendix 1, page 85 and 86 of your pack, just details 2021 work which is underway. So you can see there's quite a bit now that's either commenced or we've started planning. Where you see the ones that have got specification issue next to them, that's where we've got a scope agreed and field work is underway. The second appendix just details the reports we finalised since the last committee. So these are all remaining pieces of work from 1920. So you can see that there's 2 audits there we finalised since the last committee. It just summarises the work that carried out, the assurance rating, and the number of actions agreed. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Sorry, can I just clarify? Did you mean 2020, not 1920?
So Appendix 1 is 2020-21, that's the current year, and then Appendix 2, the reports are finalised, that's from 2019-20, so the last year.
Yep. Do any members have any questions on this report?
No.
Okay, I can't see any hands. I mean, I've only got one question on this one, Phil. What's your confidence rate at getting the work you've got ongoing completed before the end of the year, given the circumstances we currently face.
Yeah, obviously things are a bit uncertain at the moment. I mean, we as things have progressed so far, been able to get a lot of the work started. We seem to be able to work, quite efficiently, sort of remotely. But we are in quite a lot of the early stages for these. So I think the real test is going to be when we get into the field work, requesting information, how quick it is to receive some of that, and then dealing with queries. But I think generally, I think we've started well, and I'm confident at the moment that we will be able to sort of deliver that by the end of the year. But obviously, it is quite an uncertain time at the moment.
Brilliant. Does anybody have any further questions at all on this report? Okay, there's no indication. I know this is a very thin agenda. We did remove some items from today. So we'll hand over to the next agenda item. And for this, I'll hand over to Nicola. And it's her COVID-19 support for staff presentation, because it was brought to the table by Councillor Hubbard. It was something that he'd raised, something he was interested in, and wanted to see how we're adapting from a HR perspective to support staff. So I'll hand over to Nicola.
Great, thanks, Chair. So Nicola Finnegan, Head of Human Resources. I did take some of this presentation to the last Works Council meeting, I think, so forgive me if any members have seen some of it before, but I'll run through it, and then towards the end there are some of the policy changes, so they're the new bit. I'm just waiting for to come up. There we go. So do you want to move on to the first one, Scott, please? So just as a bit of background, I think, from an HR perspective and the type of work that we've been involved in. So the initial lockdown was 23rd of March. So our initial role around that was about getting that message out to people, reassuring people at the time about we would put plans in place to help them move forward. None of us knew at that time how long any of this was going to go on for, so we ended up doing some interim arrangements at the time, but there were a few important things that we dealt with quite quickly, one of which was the letters for key workers. So we had to make sure that our key workers had the appropriate documentation so that allowed them to travel, because if you can remember right at the beginning, you weren't even supposed to be travelling unless it was for essential work. So we issued over 1,000 letters, which allowed people to travel in to carry out essential work, and also allowed for those people to send their children to school, because obviously the schools were wanting that evidence that they were a key worker and they would provide that place for them. So we did a lot of work around that. We also made quite early on a commitment to our casual workers that had been working on a regular basis, that we would almost mirror the furlough scheme. So what we did in April, I think they got a top up on what they would have claimed for hours worked in March. And after that, we looked at back over a 6-month period to see what they'd worked. And then we paid them an average of that for the next couple of months. Those payments have now stopped. The last payments were made in August. Some of that was on the basis that some of them were term time workers, and when the schools reopened, so you had like passenger transport, things like that. And some of our venues did reopen, like Newham Grange Leisure Farm and others. So the areas where the casual workers, they were going back to work, so we stopped those payments. But we've also got them involved, while those payments were being made, it was on the basis that they were available for work. So we've used those people to do things like temperature checks in the supermarkets and town centre. We've asked them to do take part in some of the leafleting, and also some of the work at TAMP, which is where they kept all the PPE. So we've had people actually redeployed into there to deal with that as well. So I think that was, and we were comparable with other local authorities. We all followed a similar path in terms of casual workers. And regionally, I know a lot have stopped their payments now as well. So, but it filled that gap for those workers in those particular areas, and I know it was appreciated at the time. So from a wellbeing point of view, we started to look at, as things wore on, there's lots of different impacts of COVID, some more obvious than others. There's obviously the physical symptoms and the practicalities of becoming ill. But there was lots of things around that as well that we had to think about. You know, people were very anxious because they didn't know what was going to happen. They were anxious about how the work would be carried out, about their families, and lots of things. So these were just some of the implications, if you like, and the wider implications of as a result of COVID, because it was an unprecedented time we were in. So we started to look at some of the things. Sorry, Scott, I've skipped on. Thank you. That was the list of things. I'm just talking. I'm looking at that screen. I couldn't say sorry. So those were a lot of the things that people were starting to tell us were affecting them. So that was the basis of we need to start looking at actually what can we do to help people. Sorry, go to the next one now, Scott, please. So in terms of physical support, obviously when lockdown came, people who had agile equipment, we asked them to take that with them so they could access services from home. As time moved on, and that went on to a little bit longer, we did things like making chairs available so people could contact us, and we arranged to get their work chairs dropped off at home for them, so it was a bit more comfortable. We also have let people access ICT equipment, so if they had an additional screen on their desk at work, their keyboard, their mouse, things like that, that would work, that would help working on a laptop from home. It would make it easier for them. And we had, I think, about 200 chairs that we actually took out and delivered. So again, some of, you know, when I go back to the casuals and people like that, we used some of the available staff that we had to do that, or people who would have been doing other jobs at the time. So they were able to do that for us. We also engaged with public health because, and you've probably found this yourselves, there's a much greater temptation, I think, when you're at home to sit in the same position for long periods of time. You don't get up and move about as often as you would if you were in the office, whether that was to go and see somebody, to go and make a cup of tea, just to generally move around. So we worked with Craig Postgate in public health, who developed a series of short videos for us, stretch well videos. He put together different stretching, so whether that's for, you know, the lower body, shoulders, neck, things like that. And we asked people if they were having any particular issues to let us know. And Craig's continued to do those, and they're rolled out, and they're all available on his YouTube channel. And we try to send it out at a point that sort of catches people's attention. So we'll go halfway through the morning, and then it'll go out and say, right, you need to stop now, take a break. I know it's not always possible if people are in meetings, but if you're not, step away from your PC for 10 minutes, just do a little bit of something to try and to keep you moving, really, and stop being stiff. So those are some of the physical things that we did to support people. If you go to the next one, Scott, please. But then we're very aware of, not only from a work point of view, but from a general point of view, of all of the mental health issues that people potentially are facing. So we've been reminding people regularly, and we'll continue to do this, of what's available there for them. So at the beginning of April, we introduced the Employee Assistance Programme, which is a telephone support service, and that's available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year to all employees. If they contact that service and they're wanting something a bit more, for example, the telephone counselling, that can be facilitated through that programme as well. So like I say, we remind people regularly that's there, and they can contact. They don't have to come through HR or through the manager. They can just contact directly. So that's available for them. We have a network of mental health first aiders right across the council. I think we were up to about 65. So these are individual employees who have put themselves forward to be a bit, well, to be a support for their peers, really, and the people around them. So they've done formal training around this. And what we're asking them to do is, on a local, just even a team level, is to keep in touch with the people around them, and just make sure that people know they're there as a point of access again if they're struggling and they want some support. We have health champions again across the services, and this is something we put in place when we did the Better Health at Work Award. And we're going to be doing some more work with health champions about healthy eating and things like that, because we've had some people say, you know, they may have overindulged slightly during this time. I'm sure, you know, might have heard reference to the COVID stone. I don't know whether it'll end up as 2 stone by the time we go into the 6 months, but and it's about trying to get the whole realm of healthy eating, well-being, physical exercise, the whole thing, we've got to get it all. So we're going to work with them to do a little bit more around the healthy eating aspects of that. The next one, please, Scott. And these are just a few of the other support mechanisms that are not necessarily run by us, but they're there, they're available for people, and we promote those services so that people can access them. Every Mind Matters is the NHS one, and this is about, I wouldn't say mental health literacy, but it's about people understanding what we mean by mental health, and it's not necessarily, you know, there can be some stigma attached to the concept of mental health, and it's not about that. It's about a wider understanding of all of the issues that that come under that umbrella, if you like, and it looks at giving them some skills to improve their own mental health. Mind, Middlesbrough and Stockton Mind, is an organisation we've worked with for years. Again, that's a service that people can go direct to, whether it, you know, yeah, they can do it through work or not through work. Mental Health Foundation, again, is about, they talk about protecting and sustaining your mental health. So this is about giving you some key tools for your own, for people to use themselves. A lot of this isn't about people having to go continuously to other people. It's about short interventions where they can go and get those tools and they can use them themselves while they're at home. And finally on there's the Recovery College, which is through the TUVE network. And again, this is slightly different because I think within the Recovery College it also touches on things like spirituality. And I know for some people it's not so bad now where you've got some places of worship that are back open. I think some people who may have found solace in other places were suffering a little bit because they didn't have the same access to that network of people that they would have had before. But all of these details and all of the ways to contact them are all available on the intranet, and we push out those regular reminders. And we'll continue to do that through this period. We've got the next one, Scott, please. So then, specifically around working from home, we've done, I think we're on to our third one now. So at the time we've done 2. So these are short, sharp newsletters with short articles, short bullets that try and catch people's attention. To reiterate some of those early messages that we've said, what's available to support them physically and mentally, but also some bits in there about ICT. I know somebody had said that they felt that their energy consumption had gone up because they were at home and they're normally out at work all the time. And that's a real funny one because we had 2 sides of that. So we had somebody who lived alone who said theirs had increased. We had other people who said, but they've saved a lot of money because they've not travelled to work. So it's a real balance. So we've tried to put some bits of financial things in there. We put some energy saving tips in there. You know, daft things like how many times might you walk past the kettle and flick it on and then you get distracted and go to something else. You know, only put enough water in the kettle to boil to make a cup of tea and not, 6 cups of tea like you might if you were at work. So we've carried on doing those to try and support people, and we've asked people all the time to let us know if there's anything else they want to know. We use that to pass across some of the important messages of the things that are available for people. And we also use that to link to a survey to ask people how they were doing at home, how they felt about working at home was affecting them. And we got quite a good feedback from that because I think it was interesting, but I think it was about 80% of people felt that they worked either as well or better at home than they did in the office. And I know people have different views about this, and there's a whole thing about measuring productivity and, and there's lots of things that we need to do around that. But I think it was encouraging to know that given that we were driven into this by, unforeseen circumstances, that the majority of people, who were having to do that from home are managing and they're coping and they feel okay. We do have a small minority of people that don't feel it's working for them. And what we've done with some of those individuals, particularly from a wellbeing point of view, occasionally we've had some people come back into the office. And whilst we're the whole point is at the moment, if you can work from home, you stay at home, and that is the rule. But from a wellbeing perspective, if we have somebody who's really struggling, we've actually said to them, on a particular, not all day, every day, but on a particular day, come back into the office for a couple of hours so that they can get the support that they need. I think that's really important. Go to the next one, Scott, please. So as well as the working from home newsletters, we've obviously had to put information out there for managers because it's different for them too. So we have a People Matters newsletter, which is mainly managers' messages and about what their responsibilities are. So it's really important that they continue to support people. You know, we don't want this out of sight, out of mind. We want to make sure that they're regularly in contact with people, that they're recognising the challenges that the staff might be going through. We still all have to deliver whatever our outcomes are. You know, we set priorities at the beginning of the year and they're still there and they still need to be delivered. They may have changed in the way that they're delivered because of COVID, but we're still there to do a job and to maintain our services, and we've got to make sure that that's managed. And keeping in touch, people are missing those moments. I don't know, you call them water cooler moments, you know, the 2 minutes that you might have had a quick chat while you're making a cup of tea in the kitchen. So, and we don't know everybody's family circumstances, so it's really important to do a mixture of those things. So you still should be having your regular team meetings, should be having service meetings, but also you should be doing that informal bit. You know, within HR we do a cup of tea and a catch up on a Wednesday just for half an hour. You know, it's not a work thing, it's just for people to drop in and out as they want to and just have a chat about non-work things. We did I did a bit of a slideshow. I got everybody to send in just a picture of what made them happy. And it was really good. And then I pulled them all together and there was some themes in it. So there was family, there was holidays, there was all this. And then we got everybody together and we went through them and everybody really enjoyed that. It was a simple thing, but it's no different as if you would have showed somebody a photograph on your phone at work, you know, of the grandkids or something else. And we just need to make sure that we keep in touch and keep those networks going. The next one, please. So we have more to do because, well, as we've seen only this week, things keep changing on a regular basis in terms of the government. But what we also need to do, I think initially, what we did a check of annual leave that had been taken within the first quarter. So when we got to like the end of June, we did a check in the system because we all book our annual leave through our computer system. And at the end of quarter one, there was 50% less annual leave taken than in the same period the year before. Now, a lot of that people were putting down to, well, people are at home, so they don't think of taking holiday, and especially during lockdown, because there was a feeling that, well, I can't go anywhere, so I won't use my annual leave. So that began us to start sending out messages to say, but it's just as important for you to be able to switch off and move away from your machine and get that break from work. We've just done another review at the end of September, and it's getting back to somewhere near where it was this time last year. I mean, it's been across the summer. The kids have, you know, obviously been off. So I think people have used that opportunity. But we will keep an eye on that and we will make sure that we say to people regularly, you know, your annual leave is there for a reason. And just because you might be working from home doesn't mean you still need to make that separation. So we'll do that. Shielding, the first round, when I say it came to an end on the 1st of August, the government, I think they called it, they paused it. Now, there was rumblings a couple of weeks ago about whether there would be a phase 2 shielding. They haven't actually done that yet. But if we do go into another lockdown situation, it's possible that we might end up with staff potentially who may have to shield again. But we'll deal with those. We've not had any great issues out of that. We've worked with the managers and with the individuals to make sure we can do that. And we're very conscious of, you know, people's anxieties around that. It may not necessarily be those individuals, but they might have family members that are very vulnerable. So we'll work with managers to do that. When I was writing this originally, managing reoccupation concerns, because that's what we were planning for. Middle of November, we were planning reoccupation. That isn't going to be happening in the middle of November. The rules will stay as they are, which is if you can work from home, you stay at home. There are only some meetings that we're having face-to-face at the moment, and they are generally around the welfare of individuals. So if we've got meetings coming to the end of a process, then potentially we're doing those face-to-face, but I'll come on to that in a minute in the policy information. And I've called it there, managing the aftermath. But we need to get to the end of that to get to the aftermath. And I think a lot of, if you listen to a lot of the health sector, they keep talking about almost PTSD type of environment, because you've had people go through traumatic experience. You know, you've had people lose loved ones and they couldn't have proper funerals and they couldn't have, you know, so I think there's a feeling that there's still more to come in terms of mental health, and we need to have a look at that. And I think we've had some funding made available to us from the money from COVID from the government to look at the health and wellbeing side of it, that's purely in relation to COVID. So we're looking at that now, and how we can do that and tailor that to meet the needs of people. Next one, Scott, please. So if we moved on to these, now the next couple of slides are just in terms of the policies and what either amends or changes that we've made. One of the big issues is about, you know, we had people, what we didn't want is people who had symptoms or feeling unwell coming to work because they thought it might trigger a process. And I think this was recognised nationally, and we got guidance through to say, actually, any COVID-related illness doesn't count towards our sickness triggers. So normally, if you have 7 days off in a rolling 12-month period or 2 occasions in 3 months, that would hit what we call a trigger. So that would set off a managing attendance process, starting with an informal meeting to understand why you'd been off. Is there anything we can do to support you? Continued absence would take you further down that route. What we said was with COVID-related illnesses, it wouldn't make you hit a trigger if you were already in a managing attendance process. It wouldn't make you hit the next stage of the process. So if you were on a warning, it wouldn't take you to a final warning. If you were on a final one, it wouldn't take you to dismissal. So it was to give some reassurance, I think, to people that if they were suffering those symptoms, then they needed to follow the government advice. And if that advice was you don't need to be at work, then you shouldn't be at work. Next one, please, Scott. Another specific one that came out, and this came out nationally, was that in our redundancy consultation policy, when we have selection criteria, so if we have 4 people and only 3 jobs, we go through a selection criteria process. And one of those selection criteria is people's sickness record. So again, if there was any COVID-related absence within that sickness record, it would be discounted for the purposes of that redundancy selection. So we amended the policy. We've amended the policy at the moment, and that'll just stay as it is. The important thing with that, and the thing we need to remember, is our redundancy policy looks at current year plus the previous 2. So we'll have to leave that amendment in there for a few years to make sure that, you know, if in 18 months' time there's a redundancy situation, somebody just doesn't look back and forget that that's the case. So we'll make sure that that stays in for the next few years. Next one, please. Travel and subsistence. So there's a few things, because we've said to people work from home and they're not allowed to come into the office. We've had long discussions with HMRC. Normally, when you put a mileage claim in, even if you went straight from home to a visit, we would tell people to take off your normal home to work mileage. So if I normally went into Civic Centre and then I went on somewhere, if in another day I went straight somewhere, we would say, actually, but take off your normal home to work mileage, because you would normally incur that if you were going into the office. And that's what the HMRC say. Because we've forced people to work from home during this period, they are actually allowed to claim their mileage from home direct to the visit that they might be going on. That is only a temporary thing, whilst when there comes a point, if we get to a mixed economy and they're spending some time in the office and some time at home, that will stop, because then it becomes more about a choice. But the HMRC are clear when we are forcing that situation that people are allowed to do that. So we've done that. You know, their home is their temporary workplace, and that's how they see it. We introduced the £200 working from home payment, which was to allow people to buy other equipment. I know we said we let people take chairs and keyboards and things like that, but people didn't have necessarily a desk area or other things. So the £200 was introduced as a one-off, and that's an upper limit for people to buy some equipment that might assist them working from home. Because I think it was one of those things, as we knew it was going on a bit longer. Initially, we thought it was going to be the lockdown period, then everybody back at work. It's gone on longer than that, and we appreciate that people need to be a bit, you know, to have things to make it as easy as possible. And at the bottom, we talk about reoccupation. There'll be lots of things we do with reoccupation. And what we're planning to do is things like an e-learning module. So we will take people through, even, you know, if it's next year, there will still be all of the COVID secure things that have been put in place, how people enter the building, exit the building, use the kitchen, the toilets, the desk areas. So we'll do all of that, and people have to complete that before they come back in the office. And what the plan is, we will do like a video walkthrough as well, so that'll help people understand what that looks like when they come back in. But like I say, that's going to be slightly delayed now. It's not going to be November as we thought. Go to the next one, please, Scott. And this was a bit I touched on earlier. So in terms of employee meetings, our processes are continuing. But what we're saying to managers is you should, by default, you should be doing your meetings virtually. But what we have said is in some cases, you know, if it's a particularly difficult grievance meeting, if it's a disciplinary and it's of a serious nature and may or could end up in a dismissal situation, that those meetings will take place face to face. In a very large room, socially distanced, and with all of the necessary things in place. And the reason behind that is these can be significant life-changing moments for people, and we want to make sure that there's somebody there. What I don't want is somebody sat at home on their own to get the result of a meeting like that, and then we don't know what happens next. And I think just to physically be nearer somebody to see that reaction and to gauge and to make sure they can be provided with all the support that they need is important. So there are those meetings we have said we will try and do face to face. That said, we will respect what people want. You know, if somebody in that situation desperately doesn't want to come in and wants to do it from home, and we can make sure they've got those things in place, you know, then we'll do that. We'll try and respect everybody's. But I think it's about that well-being and making sure that we're not leaving people in situations where, if I would walk away and worry that I don't know what somebody's going to do as a result of that, I don't think I could cope with that. So that's why we decided that's the way we'll do that. I think that's it, Scott, is it? There's no more after that one. No, that's it. Are there any questions?
I'm looking for indication from anybody.
Councillor Marston has a question, Chair.
Yes,
And
please,
Councillor
like
Higgins
to
as
ask
well.
you a question.
Thanks, Chair. It's a comment really, and I'd like to thank Nicola for a very comprehensive presentation of a package that's been put together for a very unique situation, and just congratulations to everybody involved. And one question: can we have a copy of the newsletters you send out? They sound very interesting.
Absolutely.
There's one who's locked in for nearly 5 months himself. It could be handy. Thank you.
Yeah, we can definitely get those sent across. It's really interesting because we've done them in a bit of a different style, and we've tried to do them in a conversation style rather than a newsletter, boring newsletter that somebody opens it, sees a load of text and doesn't want to read. So hopefully you'll be quite amused by them. We've tried to make them a bit lighthearted whilst delivering important messages. So, but yeah, we'll share those with you.
Thanks very much.
Does anybody else have any questions on this? Councillor Higgins.
It's not a question, Chair. It's a observation, and a thank you to Nicola and her team for looking after the staff so well. I think you've done a fabulous job, and under very, very difficult circumstances. So I agree with Tom. Thank you.
Thank you.
From all the staff.
Councillor Hubbard, you indicated you had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I would like to echo them sentiments because it's an excellent programme that's been put together, well thought out, and I think everything's been covered. The only thing I could see there that might have been missing, I'd just like to ask what assistance was given to any staff who had members of their family who were suffering from a serious illness that could prove terminal. Should they catch COVID, were they given any assistance, whether to self-isolate, not come into work? Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, so there are a number of strands to that, really. So If they were living with somebody who was diagnosed with COVID, obviously they need to follow the government guidelines with that. But we have a number of things within our leave policy that people can access. So we've got up to 5 days discretionary leave that a manager can use, depending on the circumstances. And if ever there was a time, COVID's been the time for circumstances that we wouldn't have come through before. We do have a terminal illness policy too, so that allows for up to 12 weeks leave. And that's normally on a bit of a flexible basis, depending on where somebody is within that journey. So, it may be that people can come in odd days and do things, but they may be needed to be there for other times. Or towards the end, it may be that they don't come into work for that period. And that, like I say, that's up to 12 weeks, and that's around terminal illness. So that's available for people too. I think that's it. I think we have a serious illness one as well. So I think there are a number of ways that people can access paid time off. But I think one of the things that we've done, and some of that feedback did come through on the survey, is the flexibility that we've had with, we've really understood that people they've been forced into a situation to work from home. They've had young children. I know from my own personal point of view, my husband was furloughed. So he was in the house, or me trying to work, and and I'm saying, I'm going in a meeting, don't be going in the room behind me, and things like that. We've had to understand and work really flexibly with people. So I would really hope that, managers have done that with staff. And I think those messages have come from the chief exec down over, that we acknowledge this is really difficult. And, if anything, I think people have worked twice as hard because they've acknowledged that level of flexibility, and they will go off for a couple of hours to sort the kids out, but then they'll come back on again and make sure that they do their hours. So, but I think we've tried to provide all of that support.
Yeah, I think that's reassuring, Chair. I would like to see that more hardened in a policy, because I know it's easy to say we hope managers would take that stance and give that support, but unless it's in a policy, it's sometimes difficult for a manager to be able to offer that support. And I think the council really need to be looking into that, because the last thing the council need on their hands is sending staff to work and then returning home, which could prove in a fatality in a loved one. And I think that really needs looking into urgently, Chair. Just on another point, I know at the Works Council we mentioned staff, because they are working from home, that it's quite easy for people to still contact them out of hours. And we have really hard working staff, and some don't turn off the monitor when they should do at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock, and some feel obliged to keep it on or respond to a call.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to get that message out there, not just to councillors, but also to our management, to say, please don't, if you need not to send an email, please don't send it after the hours of work, because it can be a burden on staff just because they are working from home. They're not working at home all the way through. Thanks, Chair.
And that's really important. And I think you'll see, if I send the newsletters through for you, you'll be able to see some of that. So after that was raised at Works Council, we did include it in the next one. And lots of us, including me, now I've got a sentence on the bottom of my email that says, I may send emails out of normal office hours. Please don't feel obliged to respond. I do that because it fits in with me, and we've put that into the news. We've encouraged people to use that, and we've tried to get those messages across. So I'll send that information through, but we will keep pushing that message. And it's difficult, and we've done a bit about switching off, especially if you don't have a separate room where you put your IT equipment. People are working on the dining room table, in their living room, and even if you've closed your monitor or you've done, it's still sat there, and it's really important to try and throw a blanket over, just do something that you're still not at work, and it's really important to do that. So we'll carry on delivering those messages, but I think it's really important.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Does anybody else have any further questions? Okay, there's no indication from members of the committee. I mean, on the raised and the comments made, I do echo the sentiments. It would be good to see something brought forward, because each manager and every management style is different. So I get Councillor Oberd's point. Some are very prescriptive, and if you haven't written it down, it doesn't apply. It's as simple as that. So it would be good to see that developed and something taken forward to Works Council or the relevant place to show that something's been implemented.
Yeah. We're actually working on. Oh no, sorry. We're actually working on a formal working from home policy at the moment. That's just something that's in draft at the moment. So I think it would be good to include some of that guidance in there as well. But yeah, we can definitely bring it forward to Works Council as well.
Brilliant. That's great. Well, thank you for that, Nicola.
Thank you.
It was really interesting, and it's quite good to see the level of support officers receive while working from home.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So this leads on to agenda item 7, any urgent items which in the opinion of the chair may be considered. Well, ironically, there weren't any. However, having received the Gazette today, I think it's important that as a committee that focuses on governance and processes, and we're here to reassure the public, I would just like to say that following Andy MacDonald, Middlesbrough Labour MP's serious allegations about the Mayor of Middlesbrough regarding the Mayor's Boho 10 project, referring to it as ludicrous and stating £600,000 of taxpayers' money has been thrown away on the whim of a mayor, and demanding a full independent inquiry to find out how such money could be spent on a plan with no commercial or architectural justification or merit. I think it's therefore incumbent, based on those allegations, for us as an audit committee to consider those allegations and urge the MP to submit all of the relevant information in his possession to this committee within 7 working days. Now, I can't see this being an issue, with the Mayor being an advocate of openness and transparency, and it also, he would welcome the concerns in writing to this committee to be considered by this committee, no doubt, and it'll be an opportunity for us to look at them, consider them, and determine what should be done with the information and evidence provided by the MP. And it would give confidence to the taxpayer of the town that the money is not being wasted. I mean, as Mr. Preston stated, after decades of the same old faces, the same old ideas and party politics.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair.
2 seconds. Things are changing for the better, and I think we'd be failing as a committee not to invite the MP to submit his concerns in writing, and for us to not consider those concerns and look at them and provide the public the assurances that they deserve. Does anybody have any comments?
Chair, just on that, sorry.
Sorry, go on, Andrew.
Sorry, Chair, sorry, Chair, on that point, just in relation to that, isn't it a matter for the MP, Andy MacDonald, whether or not he wishes to make those submissions to the council?
I'm very much of the view, though, Andrew, and it's well within the rights of the committee to invite the put up or shut up, because it does nothing for the image of the town to have allegations that aren't backed up, that people aren't willing to put in writing to the relevant committee in order for them to be considered. Carl, go to Councillor Wright, then Councillor Higgins, and then anything else that indicates. Councillor Wright.
Thanks, Chair. I would support your invitation to invite Andy MacDonald to the committee and to submit that in writing. It's worth pointing out that Mr. MacDonald's comments regarding the allegations were in response to a Freedom of Information request made by an award-winning architect. So that information is available for this committee to consider as well.
Chair, if I can, I don't know. I'm just referring to the terms of reference for this particular committee, and wonder whether or not that it actually does sit within this committee rather than an alternative.
Well, we could. It normally falls, when it relates to governance and processes, it normally falls within the remit of this committee. Previous requests for things to be looked at of this nature have fallen to the feet of this committee.
So, in terms of the governance issue, what governance issue is it that you're specifically referring to?
Well, I think Mr. MacDonald was clear in his allegation when he said a waste of taxpayers' money at the whim of one individual. I think we need to establish if he's got any evidence to pick up them claims, and we need to stop being subject to these sorts of allegations without substance. So it would only be appropriate, and I think it would do everybody in this authority good, and I think it would be welcomed by the Mayor. But I think as a committee we need to be clear that when allegations of this nature are made, it's our duty to consider them and look at them. Councillor Higgins, then Councillor Marston.
Thank you, Chair. I had no objection to the beginning of your speech about what you wanted Andy MacDonald to do. But every time we mention anything to do with politics or previous policies, we get told off and saying we're paying party political system. Chair, things did go on, and it hasn't been that the last administration did nothing. So I would have appreciated if you'd have just said what you wanted this committee to do, and not go on a rant about what people never did.
No, what I've done there, Councillor Higgins, I've played neutral. I've quoted directly both parties from Teesside Live and their comments. There are no comments
you
of my
didn't.
own.
No, you didn't. You
I
didn't.
did.
You didn't. We'll agree to disagree.
We're not here to get into party politics, and I think that's the whole point. It's about putting these claims and allegations to bed, and also showing the public that they've got the confidence in the new administration. Councillor Marston.
Thank you, Chair. If there's some doubt about who deals with this process that you're suggesting, and I agree with it, if it doesn't fall within the remit of this committee, could there possibly be an ad hoc scrutiny on it? Thanks.
Does anybody else have any comments they wish to add or questions? Councillor Hubbard.
Thanks, Chair. Don't know what happened there. I know that Chair, you said something about calling for the information to be provided within 7 days. Are you saying that the meeting should be taking place after the 7 days or a bit longer than that?
I think I will personally write to Mr. MacDonald and ask him to put up or shut up essentially within the next 7 days. Once that response has been provided and the evidence he chooses to rely upon, it can be circulated to the committee and within a suitable time to be discussed with technical support officers. We can have a meeting as a committee to discuss whether there's any merit to anything or whether that's the matter put to bed. And if there is merit, what direction it takes, because we do have internal and external auditors for dealing with any serious issues. But again, we will also be taking the advice of the monitoring officer, Charlotte.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for your confirmation on that.
Chair, if I can I just, I'm just going to take a moment just to see, because I'm just having a look to see whether or not the scrutiny is the most appropriate route for that. I appreciate that you've put a motion forward, and I appreciate that.
Unfortunately, Mr. Perryman, Corporate Affairs and Audit does actually perform a scrutiny function, and therefore we're entitled to actually consider such issues. That's why there's been internal and external audit reports previously.
So you'll allow me that opportunity then to have a look at the terms of reference to ensure that I'm satisfied that that can proceed.
You certainly can.
Thank you.
Councillor Wright's got his hand up, Chair.
Yeah, while we're waiting, Councillor Wright.
Thanks, Chair. If I could just reiterate my point, we seem to have got a little bit caught up on Andy MacDonald, and he was in the Teesside Live report, if I remember correctly, commenting directly on the FOI which was made. Could this committee not consider the evidence presented in the Freedom of Information request as the start? investigation, perhaps, or scrutiny?
In all honesty, he may have been referring to the Freedom of Information request, but to make those allegations, I think it's only appropriate that he presents that information to this committee for consideration. We shouldn't be going on a fishing expedition looking for that information. I appreciate it's probably, and it has gone through an FOI, but I think it's only right that the person making the allegations so publicly should put that information up. Okay, we'll just wait for Mr. Perryman unless anybody else has got anything they wish to add.
Shall I come in, Chair?
Yeah.
Okay, right, I've had a look at the terms of reference, and in relation to the what you've put forward, it would appear that this would be the appropriate place for that. I'm assuming that what you're looking to essentially do is make that request as the chair in writing to Mr. McDonald's office, and then once you have received the documentation from him, then present it back to this committee. Is that?
That's correct, and the committee will take the advice and guidance from the monitoring officer, and the committee will also have the opportunity to look at any information that's been submitted and consider it. It's not, okay. If it's not received within the 7 days, then the matter will be dismissed by the committee as he's not provided the information. Councillor Wright.
Thanks, Chair. Just for the just so I can be absolutely clear, what could you repeat again for me? Which allegation you believe the Member of Parliament for Middlesbrough has made?
Which allegation? Well, he's referred to these. He's actually referred to this as being ludicrous. £600,000 of taxpayers' money has been thrown away on the mayor. Now, that's quite a serious allegation to make.
Thank you, Chair. Would that not be, and I'm obviously happy to defer here to a solicitor, but is that not an opinion, not an allegation?
I would consider it to be a sufficient allegation that he went to the media to consider. So, and if this information is available via an FOI and his concerns relate to an FOI, he's more than welcome to submit that information. But
so the freedom of information is available, but this would be, to me, an opinion. So we're asking the Member of Parliament to restate his opinion, which he's made in the Gazette, or present the FOI, which is freely available, to the committee. Is that correct?
He has clearly stated that he wants a full independent inquiry to find out how so much money could be spent on a plan with no commercial or architectural justification or merit. Again, you consider it to be a statement. You've mentioned that he's commenting on a freedom of information request. Yes. I think it's appropriate as a committee that if he's got that information in his possession that's meant to be a good statement and he's got those concerns, that information should be provided to the committee for consideration.
So, once again, Chair, the freedom of information request is what the opinion that the Member of Parliament was expressing was based upon. The freedom of information is freely available. Therefore, are we not considering the freedom of information request?
We are, but the MP's office need to present it to us because they've got access.
It's freely available. I can go on the internet and find it.
I wouldn't make such claims without having substance to actually and allegations, or make statements without having the information to hand. What I'm asking for, again, if he is so concerned that £600,000 has been wasted of taxpayers' money on the whim of one individual, which is, yes, his opinion, then provide the information that supports that opinion. If you say it's the FOI and the information contained within, that's sufficient. But that is what we want. Anything that he has to support it. Alternatively, what you're telling me and what you're implying is that the MP of Middlesbrough has seen a freedom of information request and has chosen to use that to give out his own opinion for the purposes of political point scoring, and that is what this committee is not about.
So I think I disagree with your conclusion. My point would be, Chair, that the Member of Parliament has expressed an opinion in the local media, which is not an allegation which you are interpreting it as, based upon a freedom of information request, which by its definition is freely available upon the internet and can be read by anyone, and was quoted, I believe, in the Gazette, and the local architect appeared on BBC News quoting the freedom of information request. I think what you're asking, Chair, is for the Member of Parliament to provide you with something that's freely available. Now, I would support this committee looking into the issue if we look into the issue and not have the unnecessary step of having the Member of Parliament give us some information. It's freely available. Let's just use it.
Okay, I think we've discussed it enough. What I would like to say is I would be moving to write to Mr. MacDonald. If what he has said are just opinions, then he can express that in writing. But we need to be clear, the public need to be clear. I think everybody's getting embroiled in games, and we need to be clear that if it is, as is stated, a waste of taxpayers' money on the whim of an individual, well, whilst that's his opinion, and there's an FOI out there, I want the two together. One to isolate what her opinion and which is fact, and then we'll work from there.
Can I just say, Chair, before I go? Can I just say before I go, Chair?
Go to
We spent
Councillor Higgins, and then we'll go to vote on this because we're just going
right.
back.
Well, I'm just before I go. We spent 4 years getting freedom of information requests for things that we didn't do. It's just ridiculous, John. This is just ridiculous. And we're not playing party political. That building was already designed as a smaller building. So it's just, things will come out and he'll have to answer them. So I'm going to...
Sorry, Chair, can I just as a final point, I mean, I don't know whether or not you want to consider whether or not the documents that were released under the Freedom of Information are discussed at and looked at by this committee, because that would seem to be more appropriate in respect of this rather than any comments that have been made by, in respect of the political kind of playing field.
Yeah, we would be sticking with fact. However, there is nothing to confirm that that is the only evidence which Mr. MacDonald chose to rely upon. There's an assumption that he's relied upon the FOI and only the FOI. For extra clarity, I want him to provide confirmation of that. So
just for advice from the Deputy Officer, it's beyond the remit of this committee to scrutinise the Member of Parliament. Is that not correct?
Councillor Wright. So
that's all right. So it's beyond the remit of this committee to scrutinise the Member of Parliament.
I won't ask him again. If he continues to interject, he'll be removed from the meeting. With respect, there is nothing confirming whether this is all that Mr. MacDonald has relied upon. And I want clarity on that. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to seek that clarity from Mr. MacDonald.
No, and I take your point. I think the fact here is
we as a committee shouldn't be getting involved in the any political point.
No, absolutely, and that's the point I'm making. Yeah. Well, that's the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that this committee in itself is quite entitled to have a look at that information, and make a determination on that. In terms of writing to Mr. MacDonald, I would suggest that yes, that is an option that you could do, but whether or not he's at liberty to respond to this committee is a matter for him. But what you may find that you are left with is just those freedom of information documents that this committee can effectively scrutinise.
We can, but I want clarity from Mr. MacDonald that is all he's basing his information on, and unfortunately, I want reassurances, and that's why it will be done in writing. So on that basis, I think we've gone round and round the houses enough. I would like to move that he's written to. Does anybody wish to second that?
Yeah, I'll second that, Chair.
Okay, right. When I ask, I'll go through the attendees that are present at the moment. If you just say for or against, then I'll go in the order I can see them currently. So, Councillor Hubbard.
For.
Councillor Hobson. Sorry.
For John Hobson.
Yeah. Councillor Wright.
Against.
Councillor Higgins.
Against, Chair.
Okay. And Councillor Morstan's left the meeting. Okay. All right, and myself, it's for. So therefore, it's carried 3-2. And on that note, I'd like to bring today's meeting to a close. If Councillor Chris Hobson would like to stay on, I just want to discuss a separate issue with you. Thanks.
Chair, I'll advise the committee the live stream is stopped.